Welcome back underneath the Friday Night Lights. This is the first edition of Countdown to Kickoff this year on Bulldog Radio. I'm Kurtis Quillin, joined by the head coach of the Copperas Cove Bulldawgs, Tony Johnson. Coach, back under the Friday Night Lights. It's football season in Texas again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kurtis.
How excited was that locker room when you guys got to start practice a few weeks ago?
Oh, the kids have been great all year long, all summer. So super excited to start, and they've been itching to get going.
Here in this first few minutes, I want to just talk about the team and talk about this season. What are your expectations for this season?
Well, I think first and foremost, you've got a collective group of kids that are veterans in terms of they've been through the program now for 3 years. They know the expectations. They know the standard. And so they've, to our surprise, I shouldn't say surprise, but it is a surprise that they have really taken ownership of their football team and those seniors, and have done a great job of coaching up the younger kids who maybe this is their first time on varsity. And so expectations-wise for us is to be competitive in every ball game and to make the playoffs. That's what we want to do. That's why you play this game. That's the ultimate prize. And so we know that there's a lot of factors that go into it. That's our expectation. That's our kids' expectation.
You mentioned guys who may not have played on Friday night before. Every week last year when we were in this room, you talked about the freshmen. The freshmen were an impressive bunch for you guys. How many of those key players from last year's freshman team are going to be key contributors for you this year?
Off the top of my head, you're putting me on the spot there. I would say probably 7 of those kids.
That's a big number, though.
That's a big number of sophomores that are going to be playing significantly on this football team.
When you look at those key contributors, who are some of the new names that fans are going to hear this year?
Well, maybe not necessarily new, but it's the cousin of the other is the Ziegler name, Matt Ziegler in particular. KJ was up with us a little bit last year till an injury happened to him as a true freshman. So you'll hear KJ's name again, but Matt would be one of those. Ashton Adams would be another one of those. Those two in particular have really shown a lot of what am I trying to say here? They've really shown the ability to grasp the offense and come up and play right away. Chase Howard, defensively, would be one that has really shown, while he lacks some size, he's shown the ability to be in the right place at the right time.
No surprises for you guys when realignment came down in February. All the Killeen schools are there. Just 2 of them came back up from 5A after a couple of years down with the 5A D1 ranks, and you lose the Austin area schools, and you keep Bryan there. This district is tough every year. What's it going to take, and what's the message with these guys in your locker room to be one of those 4 that come week 12, you guys still have the pads out and you're still practicing?
Yeah, so you're right. The district is tough, and each year everyone looks at that Dave Campbell's magazine as the kind of the barometer of where the world sees us or where the state sees us, and each year we've taken another step in that. They're predicting us to be 5th in our district, so we're starting to garner a little respect, but we think we're in that conversation. Once you get past the top 2, we think we're in that conversation. And in this district, last year, anybody can win on any Friday night. So our kids know that. Anthony King, our quarterback, made a great statement on Fox 44 News the other night. He just said, we're confident, we're comfortable, and it's our time now. So I really liked that answer that he gave. And so I really feel like that's the pulse of our team right now as they prepare. And for us, we don't have a tremendous amount of depth, and I'm not sure anybody has a tremendous amount of depth. I mean, you have to keep your key guys healthy. You have to have those guys, you have to plan practice smart, not be killing them. But we do play quite a few kids both ways, which we didn't do as much last year. But this year we are playing 4 or 5 kids a little bit both ways, spot checking them here and there. And as a coaching staff, we have to be smart about that because while we need them, because we don't have the depth, we can't overtax their bodies, especially as you prepare through non-district to get ready for a tough district.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Anthony. What do you need from him as your QB1 this year?
He just needs to keep doing what he's done. We had a conversation last spring at the beginning. He has matched and exceeded all of those expectations that he and I talked about, and more. Talked to him yesterday. One of our defensive players was having a bad day, a guy we key on, and I said, you're a captain. He's been named one of our captains. You're a captain. I need you to go handle that. And he did. So I think a lot of that is maturity on his part, maturing and realizing that, he can do it. He's shown that in our soap and towel scrimmage. He showed that at Lake Belton. And now we're seeing the mental piece come in, and that leadership piece that he needed to grow into, and he's done an outstanding job doing that. So I look to him as somebody that I can have those little side conversations with and say, hey, you need to go handle that in the locker room, and he did.
You mentioned scrimmaging Lake Belton. We're talking about the school that just produced one of the top 3 wide receiver prospects in the country last year. What did you see in that scrimmage that you guys can build off of? Because at the end of the day, championships are not won in the scrimmage. They're won in November and December. So what did you see from last week that you can build on as you get ready for District 12 6A? Well,
first of all, that is a program at the 5A level that is perennial 3 rounds deep since they've been around, other than 1 year, their first year. They've been 2 and 3 rounds deep. They have had elite talent. He may be a little down into his standard right now, but they're well coached. They're disciplined, and they play a good brand of football over there. So when we got over there, we knew in our minds as coaches that this was going to be a severe test for us to see where we were. And if you saw the scrimmage, we looked really good. And I don't know if we're really good or they had a bad night, because it could be one or the other, right? But within 4 plays, we had 2 60-yard touchdowns. Within 8 plays, we had 3 touchdowns. And so we moved up and down the field offensively with precision. Again, Anthony King operating the offense the way we asked him to do it, making the right reads, making the right keys, the offensive line, blocking the appropriate people. And then both running backs that we have that we showcase did their job. The receivers did their job. Defense, which was my biggest focus going into that scrimmage, was how would they react, because we're a little undersized. You're going to notice we're not as big as most teams on the defense. They flew around. They were electric. I was really impressed with Davion Phillips, number 1, and then JoJo. JoJo's a young kid that came up, one of those youngsters, and I was curious to see how he would handle his first quote-unquote varsity action, and he did a phenomenal job. And so the linebacking core, I thought, did a great job on Thursday night at the scrimmage.
Well, now it's time for kickoff. So when we come back, we're going to take a deep dive into tonight's matchup. It's the Ellison Eagles and the Copperas Cove Bulldawgs. Keep it here. You're listening to Countdown to Kickoff on Bulldog Radio. We're back on Countdown to Kickoff. You're listening to Bulldog Radio. Kurtis Quillin alongside Tony Johnson, the head coach of the Copperas Cove Bulldawgs. And let's talk about the Bulldog offense in tonight's matchup. What do you see from this Ellison defense? You've been talking about their defensive line, which, surprise, if you've ever seen Ellison football, their defensive line's pretty good this year.
Yeah, those 2 kids that went to Baylor a couple of years ago off that D line, they kind of pride themselves on being, and it's the same coach. He does a great job of developing kids. They're big. What they like to do is pressure, run pressure, pass pressure. They are going to pressure from the moment the ball is snapped. So we've been working a lot this week on blitz pickups, running backs getting into protection, and screen game because of that fact. They do bring a lot of pressures. When you do that, however, if you make a mistake, we have the elite speed at receiver, and we have a quarterback who's playing at a high level right now early on this year to make you pay. And so our focus the last 2 days, 3 days, I don't know when this will air, but the last few days has been simply to handle those pressures that we've seen. And it's hard to gauge because we're looking at film from a year ago, right? And so a lot of those kids aren't there. And then all we have to go on is their scrimmage. And they played a wing T football team, their scrimmage. So they weren't getting to have to cover a lot of passes against a wing T football team. So for us, breaking them down, we have to go a lot off what we saw last year because it is the same defensive coordinator. So we can assume we're going to get cover 3. We can assume that they're going to press us, just try to make a statement and bring the house and blitz. They'll blitz anywhere from 6, 7, or 8 kids on any given play. But again, pick your poison, okay? If you're going to do that, you've got to be able to handle empty. You've got to be able to handle 4 wide, and you got to be careful of our screen game because we do have 2 really elite running backs that we like, and we think, obviously Malik Cuthbert is a returning all-district running back. So if he gets into the screen game and they overrun, they could be a long night for them. So we've got to find a way to slow them down.
When you look at slowing them down and you talk about those guys, I mean, how much is that short game going to help whenever they start blitzing the entire defensive line, or they blitz the line and they bring in the outside backer to be able to chase you down?
Yeah, and they're going to do that. They're going to bring they're a 3-4 defense, so they're going to bring those overhangs down and bring them off the edge. We are planning to incorporate. We have a lot of tight end stuff that we use. We do have 30 personnel that we didn't use last year that has been pretty good for us so far, having 3 backs in the backfield, because we still run our power and our gap schemes out of that. And so that we feel like those guys will help in the play action pass game with blocking on that edge, and having the tight end in there widens that edge a little bit. So some of those things there can alleviate the overhang blitzes that they have. But again, we call them keys. So when we're in our 4 wide or 2x3, 2x1, 3 wide, or if we go empty, they've got to cover those keys. So you can come off the edge all you want, but if you throw the ball to a key, which is a short, like what you might consider a bubble screen or a bubble pass or a now pass, that's going to possess a problem for them. So
when you look at the offense as a whole, thinking big picture on this side of the ball, right before you got to Copperas Cove, this was an offense that for 4 years or so had been running kind of the pistol set with Jack Alvarez and then Jason Hammett. And then whenever you guys come in, you transition. Now it's more resemblant of a power spread game, kind of like what you would see if you're a Texas fan on Saturdays. How have you seen them grasp the offense and advance in this offense?
Well, like I said earlier, I feel like this particular group of seniors has done that. They've grasped that. They get it. They've been doing it for 3 years. So for them, we can stand on the sideline and say, Pirate Black right Z, X cross, which means nothing to you or any of your listeners right now.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
And then every one of those starting 11, give or take 1 or 2 new guys, they click. It clicks for them and they get it. So now can we pick up early on what their blitz keys are and what they're trying to do, because again, we're only going off of a scrimmage where they played a wing T team. So for us, can we pick up what their thought process is and when they're trying to do it? And once we do, then we can design what we need to do. That first series is pivotal as we try to figure out what their idea and how they're going to attack us, because they have shown a propensity to play off with their corners. But in everything we're hearing, because coaches like to talk to each other on both staffs, they want to get up in the face of Glass and Miller and prove a point. Okay, so if that's what you want to do, well, then somebody else has to step up. Those guys have to get off man press, and we have to make them pay. We have to have a good run game, too.
That's it, right? That's all you got to do on offense. It's just well, when we come back, we'll talk defense and get you set for kickoff. You're listening to Countdown to Kickoff on Bulldog Radio. Welcome back into Countdown to Kickoff on Bulldog Radio. Kurtis Quillin back alongside the head coach of the Copperas Cove Bulldogs. It's Tony Johnson. We're going to talk defense here in this block, Coach. And, your defense has been really solid and continues to improve as well. When you look at this Ellison team, this Ellison offense that you're going to be playing, big offensive line, fast wide receivers, and a pretty solid quarterback is what you're up against here tonight.
Yeah, I think they've got a really electric wide receiver, as do we. What I've noticed on film, again, going off of one scrimmage, is everything was deep ball related. They tried to throw the deep ball. They weren't doing a lot of elaborate crossing patterns or anything like that. It was screen game to the back, throw the go ball to the 2 wide receivers. They've got one kid that's really fast, really electric, but the way that Leander Glenn played him, I don't know that we're going to take that same approach. We're going to bracket him. We're going to high-low him. We're going to press him. We're going to mix it up. He's not going to go into that game and know every time what he's got in front of him from a corner or safety standpoint. So there's that. If they decide to move him around and to get him mismatched on a different corner than maybe what we've got, we have a plan for that as well. They are big up front. The blocking scheme, to the best of our knowledge, is the same. They do not run power scheme. As I told you off the air earlier, now that I said they don't run power scheme, they've probably installed power. But they don't run a power scheme. It's all a heavy zone scheme. The linemen are either stepping with their right leg and getting downhill, or they're stepping with their left leg and getting downhill. There's not a lot of trickeration to it. Quarterback is athletic. I wouldn't say he's as athletic as our quarterback, but he's a very salty kid. So I like to say it that way. He's got a little gumption to him, and he's athletic enough that he can hurt you. He does make some mistakes. We need to take advantage of those mistakes. So
when you talk about offenses that run a lot of exclusively home run ball. When you think about Tennessee with Heupel as their head coach, in my mind, you know that probably two of those routes at least are decoy routes designed to just kind of get the defense to bite and open up what they really want open. How do you go about teaching these kids to spot that decoy without giving your game plan away? How do you go about teaching your kids to spot that decoy route?
Well, there are checks, right? So we have checks. Based off formation, we have checks that we're looking for, right? And game one, that's going to evolve because, again, you don't really know. I mean, they could come out and be empty, play one, and we've never seen that. So we have to make adjustments. And so I think the game within the game is what's really important, especially in week one and week two when you don't have a ton of film on those opponents. And so, for us, you talk about a decoy route, they've got two guys that have our attention. And if you're going to send both of them deep and they're decoys, then who you getting the ball to? Because those are the two guys where we understand can hurt you, and then they really just want to kind of wear down the clock and grind you in the run game. So for us, it starts with the checks, right? Formational based, reading the quarterback, reading your keys, knowing what they can and can't do and where they've been successful. So much of that is based off last year's film. And so, again, each team is different. We're different than last year. So you can look at last year's film for us and think you have an idea of what we're going to do. We lined up in 30 personnel against Lake Belton and rammed it down their throat. We didn't line up in 30 personnel one time last year. So you can look at last year, but it gives you an idea, but it doesn't really give you the full picture, if you will. So we have to read our keys. Those linebackers and those safeties have to read their keys, understand when they're in unbalanced, understand when they've got a tight end in the game, understand who's eligible and who's not, and not let a tight end leak down the middle of the field because you thought he was a tackle. So reading those keys is super huge.
And that's the struggle you run in against planning for game one every year is how much does this film from last year really matter? How much were they hiding in that scrimmage last week? And that's where patience comes in making sure that it's a 4-quarter game. If they hit a home run on play one, we've still got 47 minutes of football left.
Correct. And that's the thing we talked about on Monday was, okay, there's a potential that they're good kids too. They've worked hard too. They've practiced too. There's a potential they're going to score. So what's our mindset from an offense, okay? And I really feel like this is the first time we've got a collective 15, 16 kids on offense that go, we got it, coach. We're good. It's not going to, in my mind, I don't think this particular group is going to let that bother them. Defensively, where we've got a lot of young kids playing, they need to quickly and realize, hey, get back out there, next play, next man up kind of thing.
When you talk about the youth there, what are some familiar names on that defense, and then who are some of those you called them youngsters, the guys who last year were great for you on Thursday night, now you need them to be great on Friday night?
Yeah, I mean, I think some familiar names like Colin Herman at middle linebacker, he gets us lined up correctly. Cameron Tuiasosopo gets us some depth and understanding at the D-line position. He's just a great kid who, he's one of the best kids I've ever been around. He's a great family, but great kid. Gilbert Davis, you knew him as Gilbert Hall last year. He was adopted, so it's Gilbert Davis. Now he's not a new kid. New last name, great young man, great player. So those guys are back, right? And they're a year ahead of schedule. But the Chase Howards of the world that are new, playing Grayson Burden, some of the other D linemen that are maybe Michael Morgan, some guys that didn't play last year on the varsity. Those guys are the ones that need to grow up relatively quick. JoJo at outside linebacker. Davion's back. Davion played quite a bit last year, so he had a great scrimmage. Marshall at a corner. We lost a corner in the summer who moved away, so breaking in a new corner and a safety. You'll see some guys like Malik Cuthbert cross over and play some defense from time to time. You'll see KJ Ziegler go in at linebacker and spell, where he's primarily been a running back. So those guys understanding those checks we talked about, those are a concern for me, obviously, because they're not full-time defensive players, and they're having to go in and critical moments. Every moment's a critical moment, but they're having to go in at critical moments and make decisions that affect our football team. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rion Childers, our nose guard, who does a great job of sitting in there at 6'2", 280 pounds of solid muscle. He gets double teamed every play. He gets beat up every play and doesn't make many tackles because he allows our linebackers to be freed up. So that we like our defense, but like I said, there's some young guys back there that have to grow up real quick.
All right, that's the defense. We're nearing kickoff here in Copperas Cove, so when we return from this commercial break, we'll have a couple more keys to the game as we wrap up Countdown to Kickoff right here on Bulldog Radio. Just a couple more minutes left as we're back on Countdown to Kickoff here on Bulldog Radio. Kurtis Quillin alongside the head coach of the Bulldawgs, Tony Johnson. Coach, what are the three main keys that you guys have and your final points to your young men before you guys hit the field here in a few minutes?
Well, the number one thing is the ball. The ball is the most important thing tonight. Okay, keeping it and not giving it and taking it away. We feel like there's some opportunities out there for us to take the ball away from them. And I'll leave it at that. So the ball is the key. We want that ball. We paid for it. It's our home game. It's our football. They're not cheap. We want it back. And that's kind of been our mindset all week with our defense. Number two, stay healthy. Keep your mind right and stay healthy. Hydrate. Make sure that early in the season, that's when your cramps and all those things come about. So stay hydrated, stay healthy, not lose any key players at key moments of that game. And number three, keep your head, play the UIL way. The big initiative from the UIL this year is pushing us to play the right ways, play within the game. We don't need any trash talk. We don't need any let them do all that. And so we know there's been a lot of talking because we're 7 miles down the road from each other, if that. And so we have some coaches on our staff that worked there. And so there's a little bit of talking. I would say most talking, 90% of that talk is coming from their side. And so we need to keep our head because we'll let them do what they do and we'll do what we do. We hope for a good, clean game. And I think when it's all said and done, if we do those three things, we'll have a chance to be on the right side of that scoreboard. To
be back here, Coffee with Coach again, you get to preview the game with some of your most loyal fans here in Copperas Cove. I mean, how nice is that?
Everybody in this town loves the Bulldawgs, not only football, but volleyball, the band, softball, everybody. It's a well-supported school from that standpoint. So we are super appreciative of all of you being here and being at our games. It's Military Appreciation Night, so we are going to honor the current and past soldiers tonight. And so we have soldiers on our staff, the retired soldiers on our staff. So there's a lot going on this Friday night, and we are super excited and honored to be a part of it.
Well, Coach, thank you for taking the time to preview your team. Best of luck tonight once the whistle blows.
Thanks, Kurtis.
For producers Cole Witter and Matt Thompson and head coach Tony Johnson, I'm Kurtis Quillin. That's it for Countdown to Kickoff. Here in just a minute, we'll take it back up to the Big Joe Lombardi radio booth where Russ Cochran, Ben Pettit, and the crew have you covered for the game.